distribute patients equally among the hospitals, how hard it is to make room inside active emergency departments, how hard it is to communicate and get good, what we call situational awareness, or a picture of the actions. And as a city, I think we've worked very hard to learn those lessons. All the hospitals in Massachusetts, especially in the Boston area, with Boston Emergency Medical Services, have been practicing these plans. And I think, again, the fact that we've worked together and practiced together, not just as individual hospitals, really affected our response.
And have you gone back? Have you had the time to go back now and critique what you did right and what you did wrong on Patriots?
We're working on it. We've had a number of internal debriefings in the emergency department, at the hospital level, with the surgical services, with the anesthesia services. This is one of those things where lots of lessons you want to capture quickly. People's memory fades or changes over time. But it's also important to process this in a rigorous and structured way. So we are starting just now to really analyze the data of what we did, when we did it, what we could do better. I'm sure there are things that we're going to need to improve. But right now we're still collecting data as much as we can.
Yet your performance there and every other emergency room in Boston seem to have certainly lived up to expectations.
Well, as someone who has professionally lost sleep about this for the last decade or so, it was good to see that the system worked the way that all of us had intended as we've designed it across the city and across our hospitals. It's a terrible, terrible event, and I think all of us would have been much happier never to have had to test the system in the first place. But it was good validation to know that the systems we've been planning for actually were able to perform.
We want to hear from those of you who work in emergency rooms around the country. What crises are you ready for? What keeps you up at 800-989-8255. Email us, talk@npr.org. And let's bring Richard Knox into the conversation, NPR science correspondent who's been covering the aftermath of the bombing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil.
And we heard an element of luck there, that this happened pretty much at shift change, so there was a double staff on hand to help deal with this flood of patients. But there were other elements. Well, we reported the other morning that, yes, these bombs were very nasty, but at least they went off outdoors.
They went off outdoors. They were low to the ground. I think one of the hallmarks of these injuries is that they were very predominantly lower extremity injuries, and unfortunately that caused, I think, 15 people to lose their limbs because the force of the explosion went out laterally, and unfortunately one effect of that was that the 8-year-old boy that was nearby got killed, one of the fatalities. But, remarkably, nobody else of those, other than those three who died at the scenes, did die out of this. I think that's really one of the amazing things, that nobody who got into the hospital subsequently died.
And outdoors is important because the blast effect is reinforced if it's enclosed.
Yes, I gather that, there's a lot of, there's two things. One is that the blast wave will bounce back from the enclosed walls and structures, and then secondly, you get collapse of the building if the bomb is strong enough, and then you have people crushed by that and difficulty in extracting them from the debris. So it was a good thing, I guess, that people were outside, and also, amazingly, there was this big concentration of first responders right there, because it was near the finish line of the marathon, which is a very well organized medical team, that were there for years. I think they're prepared to see about 1,000 patients.
They're ready for dehydration, maybe a heart attack.
But the people who are there may not be ready for this in terms of their equipment, but they certainly are trained first responders.
So that was an element of luck as well. Clearly, though, we cannot rely on that combination that was, preparedness. That's something you can prepare for. Obviously, the training that the Biddinger described, that's something anybody can do, but that it happened at the right time and to some degree in the right way in a city that has, extraordinary capacity.
Yes, I think it's also very lucky that where this happened, the explosions happened, it's in about roughly a mile of 6 major trauma centers, one for pediatrics and 5 for adults, about equidistant from the Brigham and Women's and the Mass General Medical Center, the Boston Medical Center, Children's Hospital, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. So, it was pretty quick that people got to the hospital. I think, within about the same amount of time that we were having this conversation, 30 of the most critically injured patients were treated and transported to hospitals, and that's pretty remarkable.
Dr. Bittinger, as you look back on that day, do you feel lucky?
It's always hard to choose the right words when there was so much death and injury. To say that you feel lucky just never sounds like the right word. I think we do feel fortunate that things were not worse. We feel fortunate for the resources that we have. There are indeed a number of very capable hospitals, trauma centers, children's hospitals, pediatric trauma centers, as Richard mentioned. There are others. My hospital also can take care of adult pediatric trauma. We have great clinical capability in this city, no question. But it also comes from a lot of planning and a lot of practice that I think we were able to respond the way that we did. I'll gladly take every single factor that worked in our favor that day, and if it means that people died, that's a very good thing.
Dr. Paul Bittinger, Chief of the Division of Emergency Preparedness at Massachusetts General Hospital, also with this NPR's Dick Knox, our health policy correspondent there in Boston. We want to hear from those of you who work in emergency rooms. What are you ready for? What worries you? 800-989-8255. Email us talk@npr.org. Stay with us. I'm Neil Cronin. It's the Talk of the Nation from NPR News.
And good afternoon. This is Michigan Radio. I'm Mike. We hear sometimes that we live in a post-race society. There's plenty of evidence that we don't. Listen this afternoon for a 1-hour special from Michigan Radio's State of Opportunity Project. We'll look at how skin color matters in schools and neighborhoods, and we'll hear what a diverse group of teenagers has to say about race. Listen for our special program this afternoon at 3, and again this evening at 10 on Michigan Radio. Right now, temperatures range from the mid-70s to around 80. Michigan Radio is your NPR news station, 91.7 in Ann Arbor and Detroit, 91.1 in Flint, and 104.1 in West Michigan. You can also sign up to get news by email from Michigan Radio. Click on the newsletters and name the email link, which there at the bottom of MichiganRadio.org. While you're there, you can also sign up for our weekly or monthly newsletter. There's also a newsletter from the Environment Report, all at the bottom of MichiganRadio.org. It's 2:20.
This is Talk of the Nation. I'm Neil Cronin. As the week passed since the bombings in Boston, we've learned more about some of those injured. Some like Jared Cowray, hospital in Stoner, who has spoken to the media. The blast left him with second-degree burns on 1% of his body and nailed ball bearings into his own jeans embedded in his skin. He'd been treated at Brigham and Women's Hospital and told reporters his memories of the blast keep him up at night. He was also severely injured, 3 of his friends. That said, Cowray also remembered with awe how efficiently the hospital's doctors and nurses worked in the chaotic aftermath. Trying to phrase echo from all corners since Patriots Day. If you work in emergency medicine, call and tell us what emergencies is your PR prepared for and which ones scare you. 800-989-8255. Email us, talk@npr.org. You can also join the conversation at our website. That's at npr.org. Click on Talk of the Nation. Our guests are Dr. Paul Bittinger and NPR's science correspondent Richard Knox. And let's see if we can get a caller in.